How's it going, guys? So today in the PhantomCave YouTube channel, we're going to be talking about a very latest review of the 4 epic parts of the IBIS mystery. So in the first part, we are now going to be having a look at, it is called The Evil Paradise. And all 4 parts are, the cover art for all 4 parts are done by legendary artist, one of the best right now artists, Grange Wallace. And so he has done sort of like for all 4 parts, he's done a wraparound cover for it. Now, I'm guessing back in the 1990s, when this actual part series was first coming out, they didn't actually, a lot of the times when we see in few comics, I guess, few comics when we see in the 1990s, we don't really see that many wraparound covers, I guess, because obviously it would have taken a lot more work and all that sort of stuff. But in this sort of part series that we are now going to be having a look at, it introduces a lot of Egyptian mythology, and as we can see through the first actual page of this comic, we actually say that the Phantom has had a near-death experience. So the Phantom has had a near-death experience. He then tells his story to Guran, and he is basically on the road to recovery in this probably first actual part of the part series. And as we all know, few like to keep us expecting more than usual. And with this part series, there was supposedly supposed to be a 5th part, so a sequel to the 4th and to the whole 4th part series. But we haven't received a 5th part yet because it's still in the making. It's still getting, I think, written up or something like that. And yeah, it's this part series again is pretty good. Pretty damn good. I'll actually go back to see. So the story art for this comic is Kari Lepkin, and the story is by famous and legendary Norman Walker, who has done a lot of Phantom stories in this day and age. We see in this comic that obviously it's got to do stuff with Egypt mythology, a lot of that to do with a lot of that in this part series. But the Phantom has to go on an adventure into the Chronicles, which will actually feature the Black Emperor of around the, I think, the 7th or 12th actual Phantom. And yeah, I reckon in story-wise, it's a good story until we get that last sort of final plot and final part to this story. I think it's a very good book. It's a very good part series. I actually, when I was getting the part series, like the comics in general, I had been waiting for all the 4 parts, and I knew there was a 5th part coming out, but obviously in the 4th part they said that and the first part they actually said and there's probably going to be a delay on it, so nothing about that. So I was waiting for all the 4 parts to come out, and then I obviously, like one of the comment people said in one of the videos nearly a month back, said, when is there another Phantom review coming out? So he said I would be binge like reading them, and that's what I did. I would be sitting down, just reading the hell out of it. and yes, cool. But we do actually see the basically the main guy in the first part. We actually see the main person who is against this sort of reality that you can he's this guy. For people that have already read it, this guy is a main person in this 4-part series. And as we all know, back in those days, and in this comic, we actually see a lot of people getting drugged and a lot of people getting into a trance and thinking that they're in some sort of paradise land when they're not actually. They're not even in a paradise land. They're in some sort of unreality of a land that doesn't even exist. So they then think that it's all good, and then the people that actually was one of the actual workers to do with the Emperor that had accompanied the Phantom in this adventure actually was basically one of the also main people in this comic. And when we see a lot of things happen in this comic, we think that he's dead, but he's not, because there's an ibis flying away. And we all know who that ibis is. I've just spoiled it. We all know who that ibis is. I didn't know at the start of this comic who that ibis was going to be. And yeah, just taking the moment of this special cover by Grange Wallace. Taking that moment and relive history, people. We have part 2, Kazim, Master of the Dumb, and in this comic, it is also to do with a lot of Egypt mythology, and so we get another piece of sort of Egypt history in this comic, and what you'd think that what would happen is that the Phantom is still recovering from his near-death experience, his near-death adventure from this tale that has obviously became a classic in the means of stories. And obviously this being a Sweden story, you can obviously tell it's a Sweden story because it has Norman Worker as the story writer, and then it has sort of another sort of foreign artist being in the artist sort of doing the art for the comic. So the Phantom is still recovering from his near-death experience. He then continues his story about in the Chronicles, and there is a lot of things going on in this comic. You got to take a lot of appreciation to the story work, the artwork in this comic, and of the covers that have been printed out through August to I think October or something. So it's a slave trader sort of story, and again we see the same guy who was actually the ibis guy, that ibis that flew away in at the end of the first part. So we have some of these tribes and some of these actual spirit and people that think they know how to cure people for some reason, and we have a lot of those people in this comic, and the Phantom actually has to try and think that he's actually doing something good. He is actually doing something good, because basically what has happened in the story is because the Phantom has to go find this person who is actually the ibis bird, and he then has to figure out a way to unclog these people's mouths, because these people that the slave traders have taken are basically kings, are basically future queens of tribes, and the tribe people are very, very the tribe people very worried about the future of the tribe and who will take over from the older person of the tribe men. So a lot of this story interacts with a lot of the future tribe people, royalty sort of tribe people have their mouths like they can't speak, they can't even speak, and it's pretty out there, I guess, but it's still a good comic. You should still read it, and the Phantom then has to track down who has done this and try and get the antidote to the people that can't talk. And yeah, it's like I'll say many times in this comic, it is, and in this video, it is a very good part series. I'll tell you that right now. It's a very good part series. I loved it, and as we're saying, there's a lot of Egypt mythology in this first 2 and probably 3 and 4 comics part series, and a lot of it is because of this guy down here who is trying to resurrect his queen or his wife as a person to try and bring evil down on the world as we speak. But he doesn't really do that, and he falls into lava, and the Phantom actually has to escape from that, and he finally does so, and we lead into the third part with what we are knowing that this actual sort of pyramid shape as a necklace actually plays a big part with the necklace. The big part with the necklace and the bracelet in this story. And we move into part 3 of the actual part series. We move into the third part, and we're just going to have a look at this second cover art from obviously Grange Wallace. Now let's get into the third part of the IBIS Mystery, part 3, and it's called The Scarface. So this part, it obviously takes some very historic and a few characters in this comic in particular, and the Phantom he's recovered, but he's still telling the story of how this 1950s gangster, as we all know, he has a scar on his face, and that's why it's called Scarface. And as we all know, he is a 1950s gangster, and as history tells, we thought he died in the 1950s, and in this comic it tells sort of a different sort of story, and tells a different sort of story of how he survived and managed to get away from the FBI. And so this guy actually, there's the IBIS people. This guy actually basically takes away his face and does something gruesome to him. And so he is then trying to find where he already knows where the Egypt tomb, and he's then he does a expedition of what he found in the tomb, and to draw out this ghost who walks, this phantom of a thing. And the Phantom then gets drawn into the story because obviously he's on like sort of a holiday. His two children, obviously probably the grandfather or the father of the 21st Phantom, actually gets drawn into this Phantom adventure and has to try and destroy this guy. And basically it's his daughter that is basically very kidnapped in this sort of storyline, and the Phantom has to... No, it's not the daughter, it's the son. So the son has to try and live this tale, and he is basically going to be fallen into a lake where there's a monster, and that monster is not that great. There's not that great, and so he could possibly end the Phantom line right there, but he doesn't, and he resists control of this Scarface, this person who has taken over this body of the 1950s gangster. And the Phantom back in those days, he basically saved Kit and got away. And oh yep, the IBIS is here somewhere. Yep, there it is. IBIS is there. Go watch out for those IBIS people. They're nasty creatures. Nasty, nasty creatures. Even though they're bin chickens, they're nasty, nasty creatures. Especially in this story. And as we see the actual last part, we all thought this was going to be the end of it. And then we have the fourth part to discuss. We'll just take a moment to look at this third cover from Grange Wallace, and I'm guessing he will be doing a fifth part cover art for when it does come out. And the fourth part for this actual comic is At the Edge of the Grave. So we have the latest comic that came out, I think, last week or something, and I have finally read it. This will go up probably a couple days after the IBIS Mystery and IBIS Mystery Parts review, and I'm just telling you, it's a good story. It has a reprint and a new story in it. So yeah, it's a good... So, part 4 of the IBIS Mystery is called The Edge of the Grave. And this is where we see the Phantom, the recent Phantom, actually nearly die from this adventure. And he explains, at the end of each adventure, we see an ibis bird flying away from the scene of the crime. And as we all know, this person, we all know she's up to no good. You can tell from the way it is set out in the story. You nearly can tell why this person is what he is. And this actual person, I'm not going to spoil it, but is actually that first person that we actually meet in this fourth part. And yeah, this fourth part actually is quite a good story. I'll say that right now. Is quite a good story. I believe it's a pretty good story, and this is where we actually see the Phantom actually nearly die in this comic. We actually see the Guran present in this, and he has a very mistful eye. He's doing a very watchful eye on the actual character that we actually see in the first actual comic, and there we have it. There is the ibis. Gotta watch out for those ibises. The Guran has a very sort of dream, sort of real life dream in his dream, obviously in his sort of dream, but we actually see sort of a sort of monster, sort of devil, sort of creature, and then when he gets out of the dream, we see another person. So who is that person? Who is that person? And the Gurren actually sees that person, and he thinks it's the daughter. Ooh, it's getting so good. It's getting so good, people. So we then reach the last concluding sort of pages, and the mummy is empty. Ooh, it's getting so good. And the pharaoh, the person who has been through the stories, who's been through all the parts, through the ibis bird, who's been through all parts of this mystery, this comic, has returned, and this is a concluding, a very action-packed last part, last couple pages. And will he die? Will he die with a experience from Gurren? And we will see in the last part of this comic, which I'm guessing will come out in, I think, in a few months' time, once they get all the art and the writing sort of approved and all that sort of stuff. But as we can see, there was actually a doctor in this sort of comic, and he writes that he couldn't find any sort of thing like about this character, and he says the person in this last part has disappeared. Where is she? Where will it lead? We'll find out in the next part, I guess. So that obviously ends it with the original IBIS mystery part. And for now, we have a story to do with the girl phantom, the female phantom. So yeah, and as we all know, Chronicle Chamber is very updated with this sort of stuff. They did a post back in probably a couple of weeks ago and said that this actual story, this actual short story, was basically a sort of story from the it was a story back from 2014, and we probably will be seeing more of these stories back in the next probably couple of years, because darkness ending and all that sort of stuff. It's only got probably 1 or 2 parts left, and we see that story end, and we go into the forum, which in the last probably 5 or 10 comics, in the last probably 5 comics of Phantom, we haven't seen a person being awarded the Few Crew badge. So I wonder when that's going to happen now. And this actual comic was basically dedicated to the life of Roth Goths. Now, I know I said back in probably a couple of weeks ago, back in one of the news segments I did, and I said my heart goes out to the family of the Roth Goths people, family of the Goths, and as always, he has been a great artist for all time eternity. And if you would like to subscribe to the Phantomcave YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Click that subscriber button down below, and you can receive the latest content, the latest interviews from the Phantomcave himself. So, see.